Cook, Barkett, Ponder, and Wolz are very proud of the results they obtain for their clients, but you should know that past results afford no guarantee of future results, that every case is different and must be judged on its own merits, and that the choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. And now, back to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn.
And welcome back to part 2 of Tell Me I Have a Case. I'm Matt Glenn alongside Dan Grimm. We were talking before the break about kind of the importance of getting a lawyer, getting a guide. I think you described it as, getting the right coach to help you through something, and navigating that world with the health insurance carrier, the liability carrier, and our healthcare industry. I want to talk a little bit about a specific case, and you brought one up earlier that I think really kind of summarizes everything. Tell the folks a little about that.
Sure. So kind of like we were talking about before, this case involved a rear-end collision. The client's family actually hired us the first day right after the crash occurred. But so when the client came in, started off with, going to the ER, got some conservative care. And by conservative care, what I mean is that they went through, chiropractic care, physical therapy. Initially you felt like it was a sprain, strain, maybe a muscle pain. And as time went on, it just wasn't getting better. Now, let me back up 1 second.
Yeah, I would say tell the folks a little more about the accident. I mean,
Sure.
Where did this accident occur?
Sure, the accident occurred here in Cape Girardeau. Occurred on 55, Highway 55. And, a few days after the crash occurred, the insurance company reached out to our firm and initially, offered, $5,000 to settle the case.
That was the carrier that who hit her? What type of vehicle was it that hit her?
So it was a semi-tractor trailer that hit her. Did some property damage. It was property damage to the rear end of the vehicle. The car wasn't a total loss, but it's evidence of impact in the back of the vehicle. But again, I mean, it's their injuries were all internal. It presented early on as a sprain, strain, as muscle soreness.
Because probably at the ER, I'm imagining they did a few x-rays.
Exactly. A few x-rays, sent her on her way, said to follow up with her own doctors as needed.
And the doctors diagnosed, well, they call this a soft tissue injury. And I think it might be valuable at this point. Describe for the folks what doctors mean when they say a soft tissue injury.
Sure. So, soft tissue essentially is by default everything that's not a broken bone. Which essentially, if you think about it, which is the majority of your body. So a soft tissue case could be anything that's not a bone or which would involve in situations that we see quite often, torn ligaments, herniated disc. Those type of issues are soft tissue injuries, which are serious injuries.
Yeah. And so it sounds like this particular client had gone to the hospital. They've been x-rayed. They've been prescribed a little bit of physical therapy. They had been diagnosed with a quote-unquote strain/sprain, which kind of can mean everything. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of conservative care. How did that play out for her? Sure.
After several months of physical therapy, chiropractic care, she moved forward and ended up getting what's called injections, spinal injections, to try to help deal with the ongoing pain. Now, these injections that she ultimately ended up getting wasn't until several months, if not 6 months or more down the road. Because initially she was thinking, well, this is just muscle soreness.
Right.
Surely it's going to go away.
Right. Well, and what sort of diagnostics led the doctors to think that maybe injections in this case, at least as you understand it from the doctors?
Sure. So after conservative care wasn't resolving her issues, she ended up getting what's called an MRI of her spine. And what the MRI showed was that she had herniations in her disc.
Yeah. And, she's at this point, well, in a lot of pain, but she's functioning as a human being, right? She's toughing it out.
Right.
She's making do.
From the outside, looking at her, no visible signs of injuries.
And probably with a hefty amount of pain medication, she could probably at least live her life dealing with the pain. How old was she when this was all happening, roughly? I don't want you to give her age exactly.
Sure. I'd say in the mid-30s.
Okay. So a young woman,
right.
Somebody who's got a lot of life left in front of her. And so the MRI, when they finally take it, 6 months after the crash, what sort of stuff was that? Were the doctors telling you that's showing?
So after the crash, I mean, again, initially after the crash, it seemed like it was a muscle strain. It wasn't until after the MRI that showed that she had herniations in her disc. So after that, at that point, I mean, that's when the doctor said, well, essentially conservative care is not working. We need to move forward with something that's hopefully going to alleviate the pain that you're having. So the doctor wanted to move forward with injections.
Okay. And injections, those have been described to me by the doctors who do them as similar to maybe an epidural injection, something that might help a mother give birth to a child.
Sure. It's a needle that goes into the area, into the epidural space of the spine.
Did those injections help her?
So they provided some relief, but it was short-term relief. And she went through several injections, hoping, as most clients do, that the pain will go away. After several injections, the pain relief was shorter and shorter and shorter. At some point in time, there was a discussion between her and her doctor that really the only way to obtain any type of long-lasting permanent relief that she's seeking is surgery. And again, now this is almost a year past the date of collision. Again, something that wasn't evident early on, because early on it was presenting as extreme muscle pain.
Right. And so, and what type of surgery? Well, just in terms of cost for that surgery, what was your client looking at?
So the cost for the surgery is approximately $250,000, $275,000 for the surgery. Again, something that early on in the case, the client never would have fathomed that she would need it. The total amount of medical bills at that point after the surgery was around probably about $300,000. Again, something that if on day one, the client never would have anticipated having to go through to get the kind of permanent ongoing relief that she was needing.
And not every client is going to need surgery within 1 year of an accident, but some might need it 5 years down the road. Some might need it 10 years down the road. The only way you're going to know is if you look everywhere, if you study everything. And when she got that MRI, that gave the doctor the roadmap, right?
That's exactly right.
So were you able to get that case resolved?
We did. We were able to successfully get the case resolved. And what's shocking and why we talk about this as being, a great example to talk about is that within days after the collision, the insurance company came to us and offered $5,000 to settle the case. And so many clients that we see that don't have representation are the same way. They think, oh, this is a muscle sprain, it'll go away. And they may sign that release not knowing what's coming down the pike as far as pain, suffering, and loss of quality of life. We ultimately were able to get the case resolved successfully for a large sum, a very large sum that was multiples past what.
We talking 6 figures, 7 figures?
It's closer to 7 figures.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, that's not going to be typical of every case, and past results are no guarantee of future performance. But that is the types of things that we're asking you to look out for after an injury. I've talked to so many people who will say, I was in this car accident 5 years ago. I treated for a little while, and I kind of got better, and I kind of could move on with my life, and I could kind of go back to work, and I could kind of get back to what I wanted to do. So I didn't really press it. And now, you know what? I wake up every morning, and I can't get out of bed. And by the time they come and see us, the statute of limitations has run. And it's because a lot of people feel like if they're tough, or feel like if they're not a complainer, or feel like they're too busy to try to find everything that's wrong with them, they simply try to move on. And I can tell you that the liability carriers, they will get aggressive with the $5,000 early on. I have actually seen a defense attorney show up at a passenger bus accident with a checkbook, talking to people at the scene of the accident and having them sign releases at the scene of the accident and handing them a check. It's very uncommon anymore, but it used to happen all the time. People used to sign away their rights within hours of the accident happening. And that's what the adjuster who's going to call you from the insurance company, he's going to pretend to be your friend, and he's going to try to get you to sign away your claim before you know what your claim is. I have a very similar one that's in its very early stages, where I had a client. It was kind of different than your case in that my client has very serious fractures to a wrist. Both bones in his left wrist are broken. They had to be put together by surgery. We have to have plates and screws inserted. Big gnarly scar up and down his left arm. It has to be wrapped. There's a lot of pain associated with that. And like most people in that situation, he's prescribed some really hefty pain medication. And I told him a few days after the accident, just take a breath. Let's be patient on this, because you really don't know everything that could be wrong with you as a result of this accident. Well, 2 weeks later, I get a call from him, and he says he's got pain shooting down his right leg. And I said, when did that start? And he said, probably about 5 days after the surgery. And I said, well, out of curiosity, when did you stop taking that heavy pain medication? He said, 5 days after the surgery. I said, well, yeah. I mean, you didn't see it at the time, but once you get off that pain medication, you start to see what's really wrong with you. Predictably, he went to his doctor. He got an X-ray. X-rays were normal. The line he used with me is, well, I guess I must be okay. Maybe I'm imagining all of this. You're not imagining it. Just keep following the process. And, he's taken pain medication. It's kind of masking his symptoms right now. But we're working with his doctors. We're working with some physicians to try to figure out a way that he can advocate for himself with our help and get an MRI. Because until that happens, he's not going to know what's causing this pain that's shooting down his right leg. And this is his one shot. This is it. This is his one shot at this, whether the injury and surgery happens now like it did to your 35-year-old, or whether it's going to happen 15, 20, 30 years down the road. It doesn't matter when the surgery is needed. The person that put you in this situation is the one who should have to pay for it. So getting that lawyer early on is vitally, vitally important. So.
And like you said, even in cases where the injuries appear to be obvious, broken bones, often that's not the case, because you may have problems down the road that you're not aware of at the time.
Right. There could be other parts of your body that might just be nagging injuries at first. But it's worth determining whether it's a nagging injury or whether it's something that can grow into something more. We're not in the business of turning, a silk purse into a sow's ear into a silk purse. We want our clients to get better. I tell every client at the end of our first meeting, your case has a higher monetary value the more injured you are. So go out there and make your case worthless. Because there's never been a client I got a result for who would not have gone back to the day before the accident and avoided it if they could. People don't want to be hurt. People don't want their life taken away from them, or even part of their life taken away from them. So I think it's important that people, though, get the help they need, right? Get away from their health insurance carrier if they need to, be able to navigate the healthcare industry, and certainly don't have your health dictated by the liability carrier on the other side. They don't have your best interest at heart.
No, and it's because, not only is it from the time of collision to the time your case resolves, but also it's from into the rest of your life. And so part of what we do is help you navigate what that's going to look like and what is fair or just compensation for not only your past medical bills and past pain and suffering, lost quality of life, but what is fair compensation and just compensation for future pain and suffering and future care you may need.
Yeah, right. It's everything that's been taken from you. I think it's important for people to know it does not cost anything to come and talk to us. I think it's also important for people to know, and we're going to talk about it next week when we hopefully have our partner Mike Ponder on the case with us. We're going to talk about how we get paid and what we spend on your behalf in order to get your case in front of a jury if that's where it needs to be. We are one of those firms, we will put our money where our mouths are. If we take your case, that means we're willing to spend either $10,000, $20,000, upwards of $200,000 to get your case in front of a jury. So next week we'll be back 7:30 in the morning right here on this station. Mike Ponder will join us and talk about a train crossing case, one of the biggest in Southeast Missouri. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn. If you have questions and need answers, contact Cook, Barkett, Ponder, and Wolz today. Just go to cbpw-law.com. See you next week for Tell Me I Have a Case. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and shouldn't be based solely on advertisements.